The thing that I took away the most was how to be efficient with your time.
In today's podcast, I had the pleasure of interviewing one of my favorite people within the broader applied microeconomics and health economics community, Mark Anderson. Mark is a professor in the economics department at Montana State, as well as a faculty fellow at the National Bureau of Economic Research. He is also one of the most curious and talented empirical economists I have had the pleasure of knowing in my 15 years as a professional economist. In this, we discuss some of his formative experiences as a young man, as well as a PhD student at the University of Washington, his approach to and his love of economic research and data collection, as well as his latest work with Dan Reese and Kerwin Charles on early 20th century public health interventions and their impact on mortality. I am Scott Cunningham, and this is Mixtape, the podcast. So this is a lot of fun to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time. This is Mark Anderson, who I've known for a long time, professor of economics at Montana State. Mark, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to start by going back to your early life, before an economist. Tell me about growing up in Montana and what you were like as a kid.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in a really small town, Lewistown, Montana. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's 7,000-ish people. The next closest town of any relative size is Great Falls, which is like, I don't know what it is now, 50, 60,000 people, but it's 100 miles away. So really in the middle of nowhere, but in this really pretty valley surrounded by mountains, and, grew up outside playing sports, mountain biking.
But your dad, what did your dad and mom do? Why'd y'all live there?
So they're both retired, but my mom was a kindergarten teacher and my dad was a dentist. So yeah, it was just a pretty chill, but pretty fun place to grow up. Everyone knows each other, which is a good thing and a bad thing. And I think you see like the what was that? What was like the Texas high school football show, the Friday Night Lights thing or whatever? Like where, I think, it's kind of I watched that. It feels a little similar. The town sort of descends on, high school sporting events, because that's really the only big events going on. And, so low key, but a cool place to grow up.
You grew up playing a lot of football.
Yeah, you kind of play every sport growing up in Lewistown, Montana, and football being one of them. So all the people who play sports are kind of these, Iron Men athletes, where they play a sport every single season. And if you play football, you don't really get much time off. You're on offense, you're on defense, you're on special teams. So yeah, I did play football growing up.
But you were like a national superstar, right? Like you were like one of the best football players in the whole country.
It's hard to say when you're in high school if you don't play, you don't play against other people from, Texas and California, the big schools. But I was a high school football All-American from Lewistown, Montana. Yes.
Yeah, I really appreciated the first time we met, when you shook my hand, that you didn't crush it. I could tell that you had trained yourself not to crush a normal person's bones with their bare hand. How did you get into economics?
Really in a roundabout way. I took some math classes in college and fell in love with that right away. So I had a few majors that I declared initially that I wasn't really interested in. So after taking some math classes, I got a little obsessed with math and thought, okay, I'll get a degree in math and I'll go to grad school for mathematics. And my old man at some point, who was a dentist at the time, he really got into, as a hobby, Austrian economics. So I'd come home, and he'd be like, reading Human Action. What is this? What's this nonsense this guy's reading? And so you should take an economics class. And so I did, and learned pretty quickly that economics wasn't Austrian economics, although you know, I liked that at the time. And I took a few econ classes, and I was finishing up my math degree. So I was like, I'll stay an extra semester and I'll get an econ degree. And then pretty soon I switched from wanting to go get a PhD in math to a PhD in econ, which was a good choice because it turns out I kind of suck at math. So
you were a double major math econ, or you were a math major?
Yeah. I got 2 undergrad degrees, one in math and one in economics, and then went straight from undergrad and econ to get a PhD in economics at University of Washington.
Yeah. Who did you work with at UW?
So I had sort of a quite the mix on my committee. So I had Klaus Portner was my chair. He's a development economist. So this is what happens when you go to University of Washington. You want to do applied micro. There's not a ton of folks doing applied micro there. So my chair was Klaus Portner. He does development econ. And then I had Shelley Lundberg on my committee. She's a labor economist. And I had Lan Shi on my committee, and she does public. And then I had Yoram Barzel on my committee, and he's a property rights guy. So it was, but that made it really fun too. You know, I had a lot of different perspectives and had a lot of interesting conversations. And I think more so than if I would have just had a committee full of health economists.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So you've got with like Shelley Lundberg, you've got somebody that's like thinking real deep about bargaining and the family, and kind of linked you into that Becker tradition, but clearly like original thinker. I mean, what do you feel like you learned from her?
I mean, the thing that I took away the most was how to be efficient with your time. I mean, I think that is something that I initially struggled with, and going and meeting with her was like this great template for how to sort of manage my life, because she was, you know, it was boom, boom, boom. You covered the topics you wanted to cover, and it was really efficient. And I always really appreciated that. And it was something that really stuck with. It still sticks with me to this day when I'm meeting with people or trying to organize my day. I really try to. I'll make a little like to-do list at the start of my day. Here's what I'm gonna do. I have little boxes I need to check. I got to check those boxes. So it was very much observing how she worked and trying to translate that over to to how I wanted to work.
Oh, that's interesting. So you always feel like you were like that? You always feel like you sort of would watch what other people more senior did and kind of try to sort of solve what they were doing? Does that come naturally?
Definitely. I mean, I don't think I was ever I'm smart enough to figure out anything on my own. So trying to observe what others have done and try to emulate that works really well. And even for, I remember sitting down to write my first paper and thought, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
What the hell am I doing? I don't know how to write a paper. So I thought, all right, just pause, hold on for a second. Let's find papers that are related-ish to what I want to write and use those as a template. And I remember writing my first paper, I'd print out papers and I'd get on a big table and like spread them out in front of me. Like, all right, I'm going to write an introduction. And I would read an intro, and, I'd go across like this sort of half circle around me of intros of these really great papers that published well and were, and I would say, okay, I just read 5 intros. Now I'm going to try to, they're not on my topic, but now I'm going to try to write on my topic, but use that sort of template that those papers have set forth in their introduction. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to do my intro that way. And then I do the same thing with the data section or background section. So I always tried to, I didn't want to reinvent the wheel because I knew I couldn't.
Right. It's funny, like we came out the same year, I think, or like approximately like 06 or 07.
No, you're older than me. Don't make me older than
I am. When did you come out? 09, 10?
2011.
Oh my gosh. You've done so much more than me in a little shorter time. I remember thinking that you sort of reminded me of like people at that time that it was like, in my mind, it was like applied micro was sort of this like its own field. Whereas when I was in graduate school, coming from Georgia, applied micro was not a field inside the worldview of University of Georgia, because we had field courses that were like theory. So it was like public, IO, labor. But it's like, it seemed like you were part of a group of people that were really like visible to me early on that would like, that thought about empirical problems a certain way. And that if you thought about empirical problems a certain way, it sort of brought you into this applied micro, which was health, labor, public development, but really it was kind of like reduced form causal inference. Mm-hmm. It seemed like you from the very beginning, you thought in terms of natural experiments and things like that. Is that fair?
Yeah, for sure. And it was something that I just sort of stumbled into especially going to University of Washington, where, my first year of coursework, I'm doing micro theory and taking classes from, contract theorists, and then, a lot of emphasis on macro. And I liked the math that was involved with the macro, sort of that engineering style.
Yeah.
You like churn it out, not really abstract, like dynamic systems, differential equations, stuff like that. Like, I love that type of math, but I could never make the link between the math and the econ, and I didn't like it. It just didn't feel good to me.
Yeah.
And so while I was pretty good at those classes, I knew pretty quickly that that wasn't for me. And then the econometrics was taught, the first year econometrics series was taught by, these time series macro folks. And, I really didn't know what to think of that. And then it came time to take some field courses. So I just started reading papers, and as soon as I started, finding some papers that were taking this causal inference approach, I was like, oh, this is kind of how I think about the world. This is, this is sort of the path I think I want to go. And as soon as I started down that path, I was like, oh yeah, for sure, this is what I want to do. This is my comparative advantage. It would be, number one, I find it the most interesting way to approach research questions. But number two, I think I'd be making a big mistake if I did something else.
But the other thing that's different about you, well, I don't know if it's different about you, but for some reason it feels more salient with you, is like, you also are someone that kind of like goes all in on a particular research agenda over many topics like cannabis. Whereas like, I feel like a lot of people in applied micro might kind of like jump around. It's like this, and then, and almost kind of like, because causal inference is the game, they like look for natural experiments. You clearly think in terms of identification and applied econometrics, but you stuck with, the legalization of, I don't know if a lot of people hearing this will know this, but you were like an early mover in medical marijuana reform. And I don't think I had seen anybody before you that had done it, definitely not done it like just hammered it early on. Is that correct? You were sort of one of the first people?
Yeah, I think our paper, that my legalization and traffic fatalities and alcohol consumption paper in the Journal of Law and Econ, that I wrote with Dan Rees and Ben Hansen. I mean, Dan and I just did a lit review for Journal of Economic Literature, and that was really the first paper that we could.
That's what
find.
I thought.
So
I heard though.
I think that was really the first one.
Chris Cornwell told me at the University of Georgia, he said, man, we just interviewed this guy. That was my advisor. He said, we just interviewed this guy, and he had been, he was talking about you, and he was like, he went and was buying High Times magazine on eBay to get every one of them so he could reconstruct a price series.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. That was my first attempt at really building a real
that
data
is
set.
So unbelievably creative. That is neat.
It was a blast. I knew that I wanted to create this state by year marijuana price data set for about a 30-year period. And every issue that comes out, there's this section called I think it's the trans high market quotations. Right. They make it sound really technical.
Yeah, right.
And in it, it's the readers of the magazine. And for those of people who don't know what High Times magazine is, it's like a Sports Illustrated for marijuana smokers. And it's awesome. And they have this page or two at the back of the magazine where readers in the 80s and 90s, they were mailing in information on their purchases. So they'd say, here's when I purchased it, made this purchase. Here's where I purchased it. So, that you knew the exact location. Here's the strain. So I remember buying books on marijuana strains so I could code up every strain that was listed as either high quality, mid-grade, or swag. And, here's the price that I paid. And so we created this price per ounce measure,
right,
by quality. But
is that in the Journal of Law and Economics paper? Because
So that price analysis actually, and I completely credit Peltzman handled it, and I'm really glad that he handled it, because he really pushes on it. Like, well, we can get at some of these questions with this price series that we've been constructing. So let's just, in the revisions, let's throw this price analysis in there. And it was great, but it took a year to put that data set together, because I was purchasing, you can't just 30 years worth of magazines. It's hard to find. So I was going on eBay. I found one guy's old collection. He had like 10 years worth. So I was really able to I was pretty happy when I found someone selling their entire High Times collection, and it came in this nicely wrapped box. It was just great. And he had like his Bob Marley cover ones in those plastic sleeves that you put like expensive comic books in, they're in mint condition. So so it was super fun. And at the end of the day, I had tons of, I still in my office have a whole shelf full of High Times magazines, and it took a while to transcribe those records in by hand. But at the end of the day, I still think that's the best price panel that anyone's used for looking at the effects of legalization.
That's incredible. That's fun. That's the stuff they don't teach you in econometrics.
For sure.
And that the shoe leather, it's like the non-cognitive skill of being an economist.
For sure.
What is that? Why are you like that? Why'd you think to do that? Some people wouldn't have thought, back then, maybe today, but like, that's like, today the equivalent is like scraping something, but that's like, like getting into you're doing more like rummaging through the world to find exactly what you're looking for. Why are you like that?
It's fun. It just feels like it feels like it's real research when you're, going to the library and finding old books and trying to transcribe data in them. It's not, there's just something that's really satisfying about that process that you don't get if you're just downloading some publicly available data set, which I've done on many projects for sure, but seeing the fruits of your labor when you do some real data collection it's fun. It's a grind, and it makes it more of a grind too. I like that aspect of it. I like the grind of it. I love starting on a data collection project and seeing that it's like, this might take me a few years, and fast forward a few years and you've put it together. That's a pretty good feeling.
So you love collecting data?
Yeah, for sure. It's a kick.
So this helps me understand maybe a little bit better, but I would love to hear more about your transition into economic history. Is there some connections with what you're saying? Because you're working with, at least one of the papers I'd love to hear more about, you had to go back and kind of really dig into the weeds on an old, a famous paper's data set. Yeah, for sure. So I do not see myself moving away from, I definitely consider myself a health economist who's doing research in economic history. And I do not see myself, at least anytime soon, going back to researching contemporary health-related issues at the rate at which I was. I find this to be much more satisfying and much more interesting space within which to conduct research. But I started the process, 5 years before the first publication, that came out within this larger research agenda, because it just took so long to build the damn data sets. So take us back to the beginning of that. What happened?
Well, so I was reading some papers by Paul Rohde, who's this incredible economic historian at University of Michigan, on, I was interested in this area because I was a health economist and I was interested in public health interventions. And so I had some interest in milk supply related interventions. And they did not start out as these historical interests, but, you follow the bouncing ball, you read a paper here, you read a paper there. And pretty soon I was reading, he has this series of papers by Rhodey and Olmsted, Rhodey and Alan Olmsted, in the Journal of Economic History on this federal campaign to eradicate bovine tuberculosis. So cows get TB, they pass it on through their unpasteurized milk to kids, and it can be very deadly.
Wow.
And I was for whatever reason, I was just fascinated by these papers. I thought they were the coolest thing. And but they were very descriptive, which was great. I think it would have taken away from the papers if they had spent a lot of time on data analysis. But I thought at the time, it'd be really cool to really bring the tools of causal inference to this very particular space and test these hypotheses. And so I started looking into, well, what would that entail? Turns out, I realized pretty quickly that's going to entail a lot of data transcription efforts. And so I started in on it, hiring some RAs, doing a lot of the work myself.
Real quick, what were you transcribing? Can you tell me the very
mortality records? Sorry, yeah.
The mortality records from what?
Mortality
Vital statistics?
Yeah, so vital statistics, mortality records, and fast forward 8-9 years, a number of people have transcribed these records, but at the time there were not a whole lot of papers that were published using these data. And if they were published using these data, it was small sample. It was we transcribed records for every 3 years from a sample of 20 cities.
Yeah.
Because the data collection process was pretty onerous. And so we just went all in. So let's just transcribe every city level mortality count by cause, by race, by gender, by age that exists for a 20 plus year period. And, this ended up being for 500-600 cities. So you start multiplying those numbers, you get a real big data set.
How do you guard
against? It took a long time.
So when you're doing this by hand, the thing that you worry about, and you're probably tell me about this, is just coding errors, just errors of inputting in. What have you noticed about ways in which mistakes can get inputted into, when you're doing this kind of essential type of data collection? What are the most common ways mistakes get coded in or incorporated?
Yeah, so I've read, there's actually been some folks who have researched this, and I do not remember what field these publications come out in, but if you're just having RAs transcribing records, you can expect an error rate of about, I think it's something like 1 to 3%, just random, I flubbed the keyboard type of errors.
Oh, okay.
And so it's, for me, because I just get really particular about these things, I spot check my RAs. I've definitely fired RAs because the spot checking doesn't check out. But I also like to have, before I really settled on some of these RAs who were just tremendous and hired them for years, I would have RAs, 2 different RAs transcribing the same thing, so then I can merge them and see where, the errors are at. So I think just being really careful with who you're hiring, really careful with checking the work. Certainly there's going to be some errors, but hopefully that's just
so
noise.
It's like it's one of the ways that errors can happen is just like the degrees of separation of you and the data collection, like the hiring of it's like a principal agency kind of issue can be a source of the error.
For sure.
Right.
For sure.
Right. Yeah. So this you said we I wanted to before we get any further, it seems like one of the things that has been a real key part of your productivity is a partnership with Dan Reese. How is that? What's the origin of that relationship, and why does it work so well?
We met when I was on the job market. So I interviewed at UC Denver, where he was at the time. And we started talking about marijuana related research.
Yeah, because he's in Denver. It's like they have probably early medical marijuana reform.
They did. They were one of the earlier states with really loose supply side restrictions. So it was one of those places where it was really visible, a dispensary on every street corner.
Got it.
So we jumped into that area of research, and then and then we just migrated our health related interests over to this historical context. And so it's been Dan Rees, Kerwin Charles, and I on all of these historical related papers, and it's just the most fun I've ever had doing research. We all have our comparative advantage. We all have this mutual interest in these topics, and we can sit down over beers, and we can talk about this stuff for days. It's just fun.
Well, so there's this one paper. So this one paper of yours is the paper in the JP that recently came out with Kerwin and Dan. Is this the one that has an interaction with David Cutler's work, or is that a different one?
No, that's a different one. The one in the JP is on occupational licensing, and we look at the occupational licensing of midwives at the turn of the 20th century and the effects on death during childbirth. The paper you're referring to is forthcoming or recently came out in AEJ Applied.
Oh, okay. So you're working on these topics, and it's like, it's clearly it's these public health how would I describe these topics? It's like, because the midwife one is not what I was thinking then. So it's like, these are topics around public health interventions, early 20th century. Like, is it something, it's like city urban level interventions, or how do I think about these things?
Yeah. So, I mean, our general area of interest has been on the effectiveness of public health related interventions and the urban mortality transition. So this profound drop in mortality that was happening very much in urban places at the turn of the 20th century. And conventional wisdom, has been that these public health efforts really drove this transition. And so we've been spending most of our efforts just testing that hypothesis. The public health related interventions we've focused on have been primarily water, milk, and to some extent sewage related.
So give me an example of like the most abnormal decline in mortality. Like what's the big one, of what age group or what race? Or
this urban mortality transition is very much driven by infant mortality and mortality due to infectious diseases. So if you look at infant and child mortality, I mean, it's plummeting during this time period. And infectious diseases, think of like the flu, TB, typhoid is another big one. These are all.
So what's a theory? Tell me a theory, and tell me a hypothesis from that theory, and tell me how you tested it.
Well, so there's all of these hypotheses that have been set forth regarding what's driven the transition or what's contributed to transition. I mean, you have everything from the onset of modern economic growth to herd immunity, to these things that are really hard to test.
Right.
Because there just is not a great natural experiment available to test them.
Right.
But then you also have the public health hypothesis.
Yeah.
And that is one that lends itself to causal inference. That's one where you can observe, this city implementing this intervention in this year versus this city that didn't. And we can bring our tools of causal inference into this venue and test the public health hypothesis. And so that's what we've been doing. So
is this the AEJ one about
So this started out as, this very much started out as milk related interests. And there's this famous paper by Cutler and Miller that looks at water filtration, and they attribute something like half of the infant mortality decline due to water filtration.
What's water?
Cities are installing these massive water filtration plants. This
is just like cleaning the water. This is like
cleaning the water supply. Yeah.
Putting fluoride in it or something, or
no. So fluoride comes much later. You think of like these slow sand filters. These were things that places like Pittsburgh installed. So you're literally using sand to filter out the pathogens. And these projects took years and years to build. I mean, there's these massive public health undertakings.
Okay.
And
so like when this particular type of facility is going to come online.
Exactly.
Yeah. This is very much like Jon Snow, kind of like Broad Street Pump stuff. Okay, keep going.
Totally. So so there's this famous paper that looks at water filtration, and we started out, I had these milk related interests. And so there's some milk related interventions going on at this time, particularly these mandates at the city level that cows have to be tested for bovine tuberculosis, and the setting of bacteriological standards for the milk supply. So which often caused farmers to just go ahead and pasteurize their milk because these limits were set so high. A lot of people think that, cities were passing these mandatory pasteurization laws, which some were, but a lot were setting these really strict bacteriological standards that just in practice look like pasteurization, because that was just the way that, dairy farmers met the limit, was just to pasteurize their supply. So our primary interest was, we can bring some omitted public health interventions to the table and see if we control for these efforts, see what happens, see what happens to the filtration estimate, or do these milk related interventions explain, some of the rest of the decline in infant mortality, for example. Do they help explain the decline in TB related mortality, diarrheal related mortality, et cetera? And so that's where we started. And then this project grew when I was getting water filtration effect sizes that were there, but were really, really small relative to what others had found. And so then our project sort of morphed into this, well, maybe water filtration, while it mattered, didn't matter as much as we thought it did.
How big's so what's the estimates that you were thinking you would find, and what is the estimates that you sort of became more convinced by?
We were getting, our effect sizes are around the 9, 10, 11%. We were expecting things 3-4 times higher than that. So
what has been the response of, like, I guess there's different audiences, right? It's like medical, epidemiology, economic history, public health writers. Who engages with you on this kinds of writing? What has been their response?
For us, it's been mostly economists who are interested in the demographic transition, which has made it really fun. But boy, we've had, I think priors were pretty strong that public health, water filtration was what drove this infant mortality decline. And so, I think folks were pretty interested in our estimates, because we were suggesting that while they mattered, they didn't matter as much as we thought. Yeah, for sure.
So now is it fair to say that prior to this, it was almost like settled conventional wisdom that it was water, and now it's a puzzle?
Feels that way.
The mortality decline is more of a puzzle.
Yeah, it feels that way. And I think it's one of these things that at the end of the day, it was a whole lot of things mattered, maybe a little bit.
Yeah. Right.
There wasn't this one silver bullet that drove the transition.
Well, what have you learned from this whole experience?
So I think we've been working on this. The project we're working on right now, I think, it has helped me think about this a little bit more carefully. So most economic historians interested in the public health determinants of the mortality transition have been focusing on the post-1900 period, generally starting in 1900, because that's when these vital stat data are available. And while it can be a pain and take a long time to transcribe these things, they do exist in PDF format that you can download the historical documents and then transcribe them. But they start in 1900. That mortality transition was well underway by the time you get to 1900. So you're trying to find these effects in the middle of this super steep downward trend.
Right.
And so we spent, and with the help of my amazing co-author, who's joined our research team, Michael McGilligot, who's at University of Chicago getting his PhD at the Harris School right now. He was one of my students at Montana State. A number of years ago, I came to him and I said, look, I really want to push this data set pre-1900. I want to take our city level panel, and these data don't exist in one source. You're the guy that's going to do it. And so, go to town. And a couple years later, and visits to the National Library of Medicine Archives, a number of dozens of interlibrary loan documents being sent to Montana State from around the country, he pieced together this city level mortality series from individual city and state public health reports that allows us to go back to 1870s, 1880s, when the transition is just getting underway. And so I think one of my big takeaways from this is that I think people have been looking in the wrong place. I think we've been looking in this post 1900 period where if we had the data available to us, pre-1900s,
lack of data,
pre-1900,
the availability of the data has kind of driven some of the questions.
I think so. We just finished up this paper that we look at the hiring of city level milk inspectors. And we find that these guys matter for waterborne mortality. We're finding that if you hired a city level milk inspector who went around and inspected the milk supply and enforced these standards, that waterborne mortality fell about 10 to 11%. And this intervention seems small relative to some of these post 1900 water related interventions. You build a water filtration plant that's just huge and it takes years, right? That feels massive. You hire some guy to run your milk department and inspect the milk supply. Well, that certainly could matter. It doesn't feel as big, but we're finding effect sizes. And I'm just wondering that effect sizes that are, similar to some of these post 1900 interventions. And I'm just wondering if we've just been looking in the wrong place.
Yeah. Wow. But I can tell from your, I can tell how happy how much you are enjoying this new research. And it seems
it's super fun. It's super fun.
Wow. One more question, and then I wanted to ask about this class that you're teaching with Dan.
Yeah, sure.
Or my Mixtape Sessions platform. So just kind of conclude, when you look back on your life, as a however you want to answer this question, what would you say have so far to this date been, the most impactful events that you think have really kind of shaped who you are and who you continue to be?
I'd say probably two or three things. One, having an old man who really pushed me and taught me self-discipline, like big time. That for sure, without that, I wouldn't have done any of this stuff. So, he pushed me pretty hard, and I'm really grateful for that. So that for sure. Two, blowing my knees out and not being able to play college football. I think had that not happened, I would have not become obsessed with math and then in turn econ. So I think that was, in hindsight, I was not obsessed with school. I was not obsessed with academia. I was very obsessed with that endeavor. And when that was taken away, I was like, boy, I got to find something else or it's going to be a problem. And so I dove into academia and math in particular, and then econ. So for sure that, and then finding these co-authors who I'm working with today, boy, it just makes it fun. I mean, I get so excited to talk to these guys about research. I get so excited to meet up with them in person. And I hope we can keep this. I hope we can keep this going for sure, because it's been a blast.
There's this exercise that I do as part of this like meditation app that I use, and this guy, he kind of walks you through exercises, and he says, he'll say, I want you to imagine you like close your eyes and you like ascend, you like sort of like float into the air, and you go into space, and you like circle Earth, and you come back down, and it's like the future, and you're at your house, and it's like, you see your 80-year-old self, and you can like go up to him and you can go talk. He's already lived everything that you have experienced. So like, he already kind of knows what happens, the stuff that you're struggling with. You don't know what's going to happen. He knows what's going to happen. And you go and ask him, and the exercise says, ask him what it is that you need, what it is that you think that what it is that he thinks you would really help right now about this thing. And I was kind of curious, like, if your old self, so this was when you were at Stanford, right? I didn't mention this, but this is when you were, this was your football player at Stanford. So if he came if he came to you now, what do you think you would tell him that would be relevant for, where he was then?
Well, that's a good question. I'd probably tell him to listen to his trainers, hire a better weight training coach. Don't ruin your knees, and let's see where you can go with this. Because you can get into academia when you're 30.
Oh man. Well, so tell me about this class. So that you and Dan are going to be teaching for the mixtape sessions. People, it's called Doing Applied Research. What is this going to be like?
Yeah, so we're thinking about this as a practical guide for graduate students, especially job market candidates in econ or other social sciences, and then early career economists and other social scientists. So those folks who are, in these tenure track positions and trying to figure out how to go about things. And, I think a lot of it is, so we're going to try to break it up. We're going to, start out with, how do you get started in the research process? Just sort of the mechanics of sitting down and which ideas do I work on? Where do I spend my effort? When do I call it quits on a project?
Right.
And so start with that, which for me, I think a lot of these individual components in the workshop are based on what I wish I would have known when I was a graduate student, what I wish folks would have told me. Because I think a lot of I just sort of learned via trial and error, learning by doing on my own. And I don't think I always got there in the most efficient manner. So I hope it's helpful in that regard. And just how to manage multiple projects. How do you know which paper should be your job market paper? Those types of things. And then the next section is we're going to have it be this guide to writing a paper. So, and break it down into the chunks of your empirical paper. And when we're talking about these papers, it's going to be this style of paper that we write. So not just for economists, but for anyone interested in causal inference. And while we won't spend time on the nuts and bolts of causal inference, we're going to be spending the class on how do you write a paper that is of this style.
Right.
And we're going to go down, we're going to start with the introduction and work our way down from the literature review to the how do you describe your data to how do you conclude and what do you conclude, what do you say, and then after that we're going to close out with a third section of the paper that talks about sort of other things, maybe a little miscellaneous type of section where we what can you get out of conferences and seminars. How do you handle the refereeing process? You get your first few sets of referee reports. I remember getting my first set of referee reports and being like, what the hell do I do with these things? So we're hoping to offer some guidance there. And we're both editors at journals. So we're going to have a little session where we call Ask the Editor. So ask us, any questions you might think would be helpful for your sort of publication process. And we'll give you our insight. We're thinking about breaking it into sort of those three sections: getting started, the actual paper, and then just some other stuff.
Do you feel like this is the hidden curriculum for like being a professor, like this kind of class you're talking about? It's like, it's a major part. It seems like it's a major part of the production of science, that scientific literature and the scientific process that actually is crucial. And because people don't get jobs, and then they don't get satisfying, things aren't as satisfying as, intellectually, and then they don't get into publish. It's like it seems like it's really a critical part, but we don't really get it, at least not in econ. Is that it? Do you think that's true, or is it that
Totally.
it is out there, or what do you think is going on?
I think that's absolutely true. I wish that, I try to keep, while I'm putting these lectures together, I keep in the back of my head, what do I wish I would have known? And that's guiding this whole process. And I've never come across anything like this. So I'm really hoping that it'll be really helpful.
Yeah.
And we're trying to set it up where we have a lot of interaction with the audience members. We want to have a lot of time for Q&A.
Yeah.
I was on a podcast, maybe this fall, this Econ ProSem podcast that's put together by a few folks, and most of the folks who listen to this podcast are job market candidates. And I was just on there talking about the process of publishing a journal article while you're a grad student. So it's sort of a mini topic that would be within this lecture. And this was another thing that got me thinking about this workshop with the questions that I was getting asked.
Yeah.
And many of the questions were not geared towards, should I be using a DD or an RD, or it was, do I want to write an IV paper? No, it was, how do I know which paper to choose to write on?
Right.
How do I know which question to dive deep into? And a big one was, when do I call it quits on a project and move on? And so I was getting all of these questions when I thought I was going to be getting more, natural experiment oriented related questions. And I got none of those.
Yeah.
It was all just the practical aspect of doing research.
Yeah.
And so that was motivating as well.
Yeah. I know, man. I'm so appreciative that you're doing it. I think it's, I'm of the strongest opinion that we've been thinking the invisible hand is solvent, like optimally designing our curriculum, and it's like, and I just am of the strong opinion that there's lots of things that a lot of people by sheer luck and learned or already knew, and it's just a missing conversation or two or something more explicit that could have done it for someone else, and
for sure.
And because you read these papers, the part of the problem is it's like, I actually kind of feel like when you read articles in economics, it's like an example of selection on the dependent variable, because you're only observing the published paper. You're not observing any of the failures, and you're not observing any of the revisions, and you're not observing any of the process. Tons of stuff gets taken out of the paper that you absolutely had to do at the beginning. Yeah. And it was crucial that you do it at the beginning for reasons that there may be no trace of it anymore.
Yeah, for sure. We have a section that we're going to add to this course, including this course that's on robustness checks. Like, how many do I include?
Yeah.
How bloated should my appendix be?
Right.
Right. And those are things that aren't, especially when you're writing your first paper. Boy, that's hard to figure out. And so at Montana State, I advise, we have a master's program where they have to spend a year on a thesis. And so they're writing their first real paper. And over the 10 years of advising these students, the first thing that I now sit down and talk to them about are these practical aspects of the research process. Early on, when I wasn't doing that, and you check in on your students 3, 4, 5 months later, and they've made zero progress, and you start to figure out why. It's because they just don't know how to get started. Right. Or they're just drowning in regression results. Like, oh my gosh, I have 1,000 regressions I've run, and I don't know what, and so you have to. So I find now let's cut to the chase. Let's talk about how you actually should sit down and get started, and you're going to save yourself a lot of time.
I think that this class, in my personal opinion, is for people second, third year and on, PhD students of all of the causal inference social sciences, which is essentially everybody.
For sure.
And then I think it's for the assistant professor too, because it's really about, it might as well doing applied research. What's one of the things that I think people don't always appreciate until you're on the tenure track is that clock. does not. It really just doesn't. I mean, there's pauses in the clock, but when the clock pauses, there's usually oftentimes raising of expectations and equilibrium. And so, at the end of the day, you have to get those 6 papers published in a particular place, and those places only publish a certain number of them. And so it's you've got to learn early on all this, the soft skills and the non-cognitive aspect, the art of causal inference. Really, it seems like that's kind of like what you're doing applied research. It's like, it seems like it's the hard facts of publishing are not just about the Gauss-Markov theorem and how you do on your econometrics prelim.
Right. For sure. Right. I mean, we've all observed, I've observed close friends and colleagues who, extremely smart, extremely hardworking, ask interesting questions, write good papers, but they didn't get tenure because they kept working beyond the point where marginal benefit equals marginal cost.
Yeah.
And hey man, did you get that paper out? Like, you got that R&R. It's been a year. Like, no, I'm still working on. You got to get it out.
I think there's a lot of market failure problems. I don't think it's even something that's easily fixed. Like within each, if you think about how you get to a department, and then in the department, which is in many ways, like, even though there's a lot of even though obviously like getting in a department is selection. It's like, you picked them and they picked you, right? So in that sense, it's not random. But in the department, there's only a few people that you really have a chance then of matching into mentorship and sponsorship. And it's all clouded by chemistry and like by politics and weird things that are unanticipated. And so there's all kinds of noise that we have all these mechanisms to help fix, like the conference and presenting and interact and the building up of social capital at the conferences. But like, I haven't seen a class like y'all's before. And it feels like, I think just, being in a place where these are in a structured environment where this can be taught, I do think that this will be, I do think that this is going to be really nice. And so I'm excited about you doing it.
Yeah, I am too. I think I hope it's going to be really helpful, and I think it'll be fun too.
I do too.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun, and I'm really excited to do it with Dan. We have a blast doing things like this together. We're like an old married couple. I'm sure people will be laughing at us bickering at each other half the time, but there's no other person I'd rather do it with.
Yeah, that's great. I love Dan. So it's on Mixtape Sessions. If you're listening to this, you just Google Mixtape Sessions, go to Doing Applied Research. You'll see the link to Mark and Dan's class. Mark, it's so good to see you as always. It's like the pandemic was tragic, but then there's all these like paper cut tragedies, and not getting to see you at conferences is one of them. So it's nice to see you.
Well, hopefully soon we gonna do this chat over a beer.
Yeah, that's right. All right. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks, Scott.